You're listening to Grain of Salt, a podcast hosted by Tom Burtless and Christa Glennie Seychew, covering the Buffalo Niagara region's food and drink scene. This week on Grain of Salt, Christa talks with three chefs about the nature of being a woman working in a professional kitchen. She's joined by Jennifer Boye, executive chef of the mansion on Delaware Avenue, Kate Elliot, the food and beverage director for Global Spectrum, and Jennifer Marabella, the executive chef of Siena.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Grain of Salt. I am Christa Glennie Seychew, food editor for Buffalo Spree magazine and owner of Nickel City Chef. Tom Burtless is out training for the Ride for Roswell, which you can support on buffaloeats.org. So he won't be here with us today. But I have a treat for all of you because I'm very excited that I'm here with three badass female cooks. And we are going to talk about the perks and woes of being a female chef. I'm going to have each of you actually introduce yourselves so that we get your titles and all of that stuff correctly. I'm going to have you start, Miss Jennifer.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jennifer Boye. I'm the executive chef at the mansion on Delaware.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Marabella. I'm the executive chef at Siena Restaurant.
Hello, I am Kate Elliot, and I am the food and beverage manager of Canalside Buffalo.
And Kate Elliot is the only person we're interviewing today not named Jennifer. So
I could be a Jennifer just for today.
Just for today. So I think if we'll try to refer to Jennifer Boye as Jen. So Jen from the mansion on Delaware Avenue. Okay. And Jennifer Marabella as Jennifer from Siena. If we can try to keep to that just for people's benefits. So I feel sort of awkward. The reason why we've not had this women in cooking conversation in the 20-some podcasts that we've done so far with Grain of Salt and in the 150 podcasts that are on buffaloeats.org is because I kind of hate the qualification of women in cooking and why women in cooking should be considered somehow different or not held to the same standard as men. Or, I mean, we can talk about this in a million different ways, and in some ways it might be offensive and in some ways it might not be, but we're here to have a genuine conversation about this. And I think increasingly this is a conversation that's happening on a national level. I mean, the first time I noticed it was maybe in 2010, and then that Time magazine article came out a couple years ago where it named like the most influential chefs in the history of mankind, and I don't think there was a single woman. Additionally, a local young lady, which Jen, you could tell us about later, received a grant to go stage at a really fancy restaurant for 6 weeks or so. Through James Beard Foundation, yes. Based on trying to boost women and get more women in the kitchen. So I think it's a timely conversation. And of course, a Top Chef, finally another woman won after decades of like only one woman ever having won. So I think it's a relevant conversation. I also think there's a lot of things changing about the way professional kitchens run from the way they ran maybe 10 or even 20 years ago. So I think that adds an extra consideration. So I think what I'd like to do, which is sort of a broad way to start, but I think it's the best thing to start, is to ask each of you sort of what your take on the whole being a woman who's a professional cook sort of thing is. Kate, I'm going to start with you.
Okay. Well, I think the easy answer is that, of course, we should just be chefs. And we should just be chefs, and the fact that we have a vagina should not even play a role. But I think that also it creates a conversation about if we say we don't want to be called women chefs, that almost makes the word woman an insult.
I agree. Like
we're almost playing into that kind of stereotype where I'm not a woman, I'm just a chef. Like so I think that it's a double-edged sword. I think it's a conversation that takes some finesse. And I think that, as much as I would like to sit here and say that we should just be chefs, I think that, the conversation should be had.
Okay, great. Jennifer?
Well, I guess I've kind of always been told I have more of a male's mentality when it comes to things anyways. I grew up with two brothers. I've just kind of gotten along more so with men. So I think, first of all, as I'm a human being. Second of all, I'm a woman. After that, I consider myself a mom. And then my career comes into play.
Solid point.
Well, I am a chef, in quotes, I guess sometimes you can say, because I think it's handed off so frequently now. But I mean, I feel like I've worked hard. I've earned my position. I can run circles around half the guys I work with. But I don't think they necessarily treat me as a woman per se. I definitely value the woman side of me, but I also have that aggressiveness to where if you tell me I can't do it, fuck off. I got this,
Right.
excuse me. But I'm just kind of that person that I feel like just because I'm a woman, it's not going to hold me down. And I feel like we were there first. And then the men kind of came in and we're just taking it back, essentially. It's kind of what it comes down to.
Okay. Jen Boye?
I think it's a really interesting topic because whenever anyone talks to me about it, I almost feel like people are looking for a scandalous story or for me to complain about how I've been oppressed or harassed or beaten down in a kitchen. And honestly, I've never had that experience, but I do think it has to do with how you carry yourself. I think that if you go into a job knowing that you can do it, showing the confidence and proving yourself, that's all it is, whether you're a man or a woman. I think that there are a lot of female qualities that lend itself to this business in a very useful way. I think women are nurturing to an extent, and I think that cooking for people also is that kind of, nurture, nourish, that kind of doting mentality that lends itself well to trying to take care of people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I think that women have always been kind of associated with cooking and the hearth and home. And so I think that as, chefs, we can bring this notion of community and family to our tables and to our restaurants in a way that...
And multitasking in general.
Right.
I mean, that's what we're wired to do.
Right. That's an interesting point.
Taking
Jennifer.
care of the kids, cooking dinner for, your entire family that's coming over for Thanksgiving, making sure homework's done, mowing the lawn, all that stuff. I mean, we take care of. And who says we can't?
An interesting thing that I came across in the reading that I did to prepare for this podcast is they asked a lot of famous, an article that I read asked a lot of famous male chefs what they thought about women in the kitchen and sort of what their take was. And it was funny because a predominant number of them felt that women were actually better cooks than men. And one of the lines that they drew pretty clearly was that men are more technicians or technical people or interested in the tools and the toys that go with cooking. Mm-hmm. And so more of whether you talk about molecular gastronomy or whatever, where women are more focused on making flavors and homey and like food that makes you feel things. And I wonder sort of if you guys think that's a sweeping generalization that has some truth or maybe a sweeping generalization that does not.
I think it holds truth.
Yeah.
Boys like their toys. I like getting my hands dirty. If I'm not digging in food in the kitchen, I'm digging outside, walking barefoot in the grass. I feel like, they certainly have the mechanics behind it, whereas I think we as women do things more from our gut and, we're emotional beings. And sometimes what is a better way to do that than create something with how you're feeling? Mm-hmm. We put more into it than I think, and attention to detail in general. Mm-hmm. Sorry, no offense, but men kind of suck at that. I mean,
she's looking at Tom, our producer, like she's apologizing to him.
I mean, I can see these guys in the corner of my eye, and it's just little things that they're not doing that I feel like as women, we pay attention to. It's just like making my bed in the morning. That pillow is going right where it needs to be.
Facing the right direction.
Absolutely.
So one of the conversations that I also saw a lot about was this idea of women who see their success, women chefs who see their success or their ability to move upward in the ranks in a kitchen as being relational to their ability to play the man's game, to be one of the boys, to desexualize themselves to some extent, to be able to lift, carry, and reach at the same intensity that a man does, and to maybe even to more so to never complain about being sick or sore or needing to leave because you have a kid at home, whatever, like going out of their way to sort of really play a man's game rather than being allowed to sort of be a woman in a professional kitchen and behave such as a woman might.
I don't think it's necessarily at the same rate. I think it's at double the rate. And I think we're actually expected to work harder and we have more to prove, which is why this conversation can be so interesting in terms of like, we can sit around this table and say, oh, well, we're women and we're built for this. But, at the end of the day, we do, we weren't involved. We weren't included in that Time magazine article. And
right.
It wasn't until 1982 that a woman got the first James Beard Award. It was Alice Waters.
Right.
I could be wrong on the year, but
I think you're right too.
But you know what I'm saying? There is still this conversation that should be had. It is actually double. And I think it can be said about women in the workforce in general, especially in a leadership role, where we have to be careful that we're working as hard, we're pushing as hard, but that we're not coming across as overbearing,
bitchy,
or that we're power hungry. But our bosses and our restaurant owners and our general managers are still expecting us to be leaders, and they're expecting us to lead teams of young men, and that we are supposed to do this in a manner that they are comfortable with, as opposed to the manner in which they would do it.
Yeah. I agree with that. I also feel that it's the kind of thing where you have to lead by example as opposed to trying to be like a man. You have to try to be like a chef.
Right.
I mean, that's how you have to do it. And it doesn't mean that you have to forfeit your femininity. I just think that different facets of your femininity come out when you're working like that in a primarily man's job.
Mm-hmm. So tell us about that, Jen.
I think that instead of the lipstick and high heel type of femininity that a lot of us associate with females.
Femininity in general.
Right. I think the nurturing, mothering side of femininity comes through in a kitchen.
And finesse on the plate.
Yeah, I think so too. Attention to detail, like Jennifer was saying, just in instinctive, this shouldn't be here on a plate that I think makes our final product nice. It's instinctive. I don't think we have to work at it as hard. But I don't think that you have to become the shadow of a man just because you're doing a job that's physically exhausting, requires you to have a lot of strength, both mental and physical. Too.
Yes.
I think that if you set a precedent right off the bat, that you know how to do a job, you're not looking for anybody's help, but you're not a battle axe, then it works out fine for you. Mm-hmm. You earn respect really, really quickly, or you lose respect quickly.
It's interesting because I would say, I don't even know how to say this right, but like the idea that we talked about being a bitch or being overbearing or being a battle axe or power hungry are not terms that I've ever heard anybody say a chef shouldn't be. Mm-hmm. They are only terms that I've heard people say that a woman in the industry or even a woman in any powerful role, quite honestly, shouldn't be. And I would say that if you look around at most of the successful women in Buffalo, and this is a huge, broad, sweeping statement, but I would say that most of them have either played I can go to sports games with guys and I can do all the things guys do and I can drink as much as guys do and I can talk shit, right? That's my jam, right?
That's my MO.
Right? Or they are super nurturing, which I'd like to think I am sometimes too. But you know what I mean? Like they've learned to be the person everybody trusts, the person everybody respects, the way that you respect your mom.
Right.
I don't see a ton of women who don't sort of fall into one of those roles, particularly in what is considered a blue collar work environment, even though we know there's a lot of things about fine dining restaurants that is very white collar. The bulk of the work is all very blue collar work. And I would say it's very challenging to find women who have been successful who haven't had to pick one of those roles. Does anybody have anything they want to say about that? Am I wrong?
No.
It's okay if I am.
No, I don't think you're wrong. But I do think, and I agree with you that I think one particular woman will sway or lean to one particular side more than the other. Mm-hmm. But I do think that a lot of it is about balance too.
Right.
I think that if you're known as a chef who's mainly calm, cool, and collected, and doesn't fly off the handle a lot, essentially they will at one point. I find it personally in my particular situation that on the rare occasion that I do get upset and yell, I'm almost listened to more because it's not like that child whose mom is constantly yelling at them all the time.
Right,
And as a
because you
result, they tune
rarely
it out.
yell.
Right.
Right.
They know that I mean it. They know that I'm pissed off if I raise my voice, and then I get a response. But I think both of those personalities kind of come into play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think it's just 100%, I'm the mom here in this kitchen and I'm going to take care of you as long as you do your job right. And it's also not, you're not doing your job right, I'm going to scream at you all day long.
Right. But I think it's safe to say that you can see plenty of men in blue-collar industries who are power-hungry bitches, battle axes, whatever term you want to use.
Often it's called driven.
Yeah, right. That's called driven or,
world.
right, dedicated, right, any of those terms. And so it's unfair because you're sort of stuck wearing this, trying to not wear a mantle that may not even be yours.
Right.
Right? That
It's assigned.
Right. There you go. That's perfect, Kate. So what is the downside of having to sort of play, if you call it playing the man's game, being one of the guys, or not being able to just be bitchy? I mean, we're all bitchy at home, right, in our own moments, but we often choose not to bring that to work because of the perceptions that are connected to it. And so what is the downside of that? Are we better people at work because of that? Are we challenged to be more diverse in a work environment than maybe we would be at home, or are we simplified at
I think perhaps
work?
it implies a thoughtfulness maybe that isn't just, we don't get to, kind of just be rote about it. There's like a thoughtfulness, like thinking before we speak, thinking before we act, kind of having a game plan, like.
That's a really good point,
I just
Kate.
hired 52 employees, and it's like you have to, they're all different ages and all different people, and you have to have a game plan. And I think it's almost a gift because it forces you to be thoughtful. It forces you to be aware of
You
the
can't just
people
be
around
reactionary.
You can't just be reactionary. You have to be aware of your own self and be in the moment and, kind of move forward in a way that is productive.
Interesting. Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I agree with that. I think that it makes you become aware that how you act, and I've seen this a few times, I'm sure, ladies, you've seen it as well, how you act is contagious almost, where if I'm having a bad day and I'm just kind of being snotty or to myself or whatever, I can see the rest of the staff members kind of going into that same direction. It does cause you to be thoughtful. And I think that is... that's just detrimental to being a nice person to work with. Not detrimental, I'm sorry. It's important. It's integral.
Right.
To being a thoughtful coworker. I mean, that's what we are. We're all trying to get through a really long day as peacefully as possible. And
Produce a good, amazing product.
yeah,
right?
yeah, and get along because it matters.
It totally matters.
I think we also have to be careful to not get stuck in this idea of perfectionism or maternalism or all of these kind of things that are associated with women.
That are assigned
that
to
are
us.
assigned that we assume just by being born with vaginas.
Two.
Two vaginas from Kate Elliot.
So I hate to see us just kind of dwell in this space where we're we're moms and we can multitask and so therefore we're great chefs.
It should be more than that.
Yeah, I think we should complicate it a little bit, and I think that's where the thoughtfulness comes in.
Interesting, Kate. So, question. In trying to define why there aren't more women cooking, the couple of things that I came up with really easily, which were not very challenging, is, of course, the perception from the outside that it's a man's job. For young women who are thinking about careers, there's this outside perception that it's typically a job.
Unless it's pastry.
Well, yes, that's another part of this conversation I actually have written down. So there's the perception that it's loaded with chauvinism and sexual harassment and that you have to sort of endure all of that, which everybody has had their own experiences with, and maybe we should even talk about that a little bit. Then there's the idea that pregnancy leave and being able to be home with your children and being able to leave when you're sick and things like that are not options in that job. So if a woman wants to have a family, there's this notion that she can't. And then I would say that the other thing is that there are a lot of women celebrity chefs to look up to. They are certainly treated very differently, and the expectations of them are very different than male celebrity chefs, women celebrity chefs are typically, at least on television, and people who have major endorsement and major book deals are home cooks who have been given a show, right? Like Sandra Lee or Martha Stewart or
cute.
Rachel Ray, Nigella Lawson, etc., where women like April Bloomfield, who freaking kick ass, right? Or even Alice Waters are certainly esteemed among their peers, but are not given typically anywhere the kind of paychecks, media or options for endorsement deals and stuff that male chefs are. So the idea is that, young women, it's not really taken seriously. It's expected that you're going to be a caterer or a pastry chef or own a lunch shop or something like that if you're interested in food.
Something cutesy.
Something cute, something that lets you go home at 5 o'clock, something that doesn't, doesn't require you to put in the kind of labor levels that a typical guy in a regular kitchen would do. And so I'm wondering if you think that there's any other things that keep young women from considering being a chef as a career, and what else we could do as women who work in the industry to perhaps break some of those boundaries down.
I think that a lot more young people, young women in general, are finding that this is something they want to do. Because food is shoved in your face no matter where you go. It's on TV, it's on covers of magazines.
It's certainly different than it was 20 years ago, isn't it?
Yeah, everybody wants to be a chef. There's so much beauty in food that I think people didn't realize until, the past 20 years.
Food Network and all of that.
Yeah,
right.
Which glamorized everything, and I personally can't even watch it that much anymore.
Yeah, no, me neither.
Okay. Apparently Trisha Yearwood, a country singer,
has a cooking show.
I wanted to cry.
Yeah, right.
Watching her and her sister, just even holding a knife and carrying.
Please, you're going to cut your thumb off.
Yeah, it was painful for me to watch. Not even as a woman, just like, why are you given this opportunity?
Right.
And you can stay home in your stuffy little house afterwards and your $1 billion paycheck, whereas I'm working 15, 16 hours a day for what? Do I love it all the time? Absolutely not. I hate it. I miss out on events and sports events, but you know what? It's important to me. I made a dedication to other people, men mostly, but
Owners.
Right. Who I love and trust and, have essentially taken care of me. But, in other degrees, it's like, again, why? Why are certain people given these opportunities? And men, I don't watch that many cooking shows. I don't know who the next top chef is. I don't go out to eat that much because honestly, it is such a hectic, high energy environment all the time. I need, as a person, to step away and
right. Going out to dinner stresses you out as much as if you were working.
I'm critiquing. I'm wondering, well, I can do that, or I could do that better, or I don't like their uniforms. Something really stupid that I shouldn't be wasting my brain cells on.
Right.
Like get me home, get me in my comfort zone. I want to put my pajamas on and just be me. It's part of who I am, but it doesn't make up who I am.
And so if you feel that there are more women because of the sort of romanticism and beautification of food
Absolutely.
and the food industry.
Who doesn't love pretty things?
So, right. So you feel like more women are increasingly entering the field. And I think, honestly, if any of us go look at the community colleges, there's
Absolutely.
far more women than there ever used to
right.
be.
And even the heart, the
when
hardness.
I was in cooking school, there was one other girl in cooking school with me, and now I walk in to give a lecture and half the room's girls.
Half aren't going to last.
Right.
But half the guys aren't going to last either.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't think it scares people off as much as it used to, women in general.
Mm-hmm.
I think there has become this, femininity, this feminine touch about the whole thing. And, look at guys' foods now. They're putting flowers on.
Right.
And, their little 2 dots over here. Like,
that's what 2 dots.
It's like the little garnishes that you think are very feminine.
They're paying more attention to things like that.
Yeah.
Does anybody else want to say anything about this subject of what we can do to either encourage or inform young women? Or
Well, I think I want to touch on what you were saying about,
Please.
Women not wanting to enter the field because they wouldn't be able to take time off if they were sick, or they
Right.
didn't want to take time off if they wanted to have a baby. Truth be told, any occupation you go into,
Agreed.
you need to have some measure of success and some seniority before you're going to get time off and before you're going to be able to just start a family. So I don't think that's limited to the kitchen. I think
I agree, Kate.
You don't get to just roll into a job and decide you're going to have a baby and go start a family and take time off whenever you want it. It requires a certain amount of success and a certain amount of, climbing up the ladder in order to have that happen.
Mm-hmm. Sure, in a relationship with your employer that's established.
Right.
There are things that can be done to make that transitional period, if you do decide to have a family, a little bit easier without fearing that you're going to lose your job the minute you go on maternity leave. And I think that having a good relationship with your employer and a history with them will make that person want to work with you a little bit more. I don't think we experience the ridiculously cutthroat competition here in Buffalo like we do in bigger cities.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think it's a little bit easier. But I could understand. I mean, I think that it's something that we definitely have to think about. It affects your life, your work life, when you're going to have a kid.
Do you know
it's not like it's just you have the kid, you come back. There's something to that.
But you know what's fucked up, Jen? It should be the same way for men. Men
should
also, one of my ex-boyfriends from high school lives in Sweden, and we're still friends until I hear about his life and he hears about mine. His wife is pregnant. He gets 20 weeks off of work.
Right.
Because it's just as important to them that the family unit be working together to achieve stability and health before everybody returns back to work. And here it's like, we have to make all these special reparations and earn the right to be able to have a child by proving to our work that we can come back and that we can do the right thing.
Right.
But men not only don't have to do that because they don't have children physically, but it's not expected that they should be that invested or care as much about their significant other having a child. It's fucked up.
Yeah, and unfortunately, what should be and what is are two completely different things.
Well,
so we're forced to think about it.
I agree. But I think the idea is, 15, 20 years ago, could any of us have believed that that we would be talking about proper bathroom options for people who are transgendered? Or would we be talking about people who are gay becoming married or all of these other things? And I'm not saying that there's been, light years of progress. We have so much farther to go in those areas, but we should be having discussions about the things we've also taken for granted for 100 years in terms of regular gender issues.
Mm-hmm. How to fix these things.
Yeah, just because it's been decided that doesn't mean that that's the way it has to be or that we should be okay with it. So last year at Nickel City Chef, Jennifer Boye, you were competing, and you had we had a panel of judges. And can you remind me who the judges were?
Yes,
because I don't remember.
Okay. Isabella from James Spirit House.
Yes, Isabella
Wojcik.
Yes, the programming director for James Spirit House.
Correct. Arlene Stein,
who runs the Terroir Symposium in Toronto.
That's right. And then the third was...
I'm terrible at this.
Kristen Becker.
Yes. Comedian.
Kristen Becker.
Hysterical. Always the first person to make a tuna joke at Nickel City Chef. Always. Anyway, so the reason why I brought this up is because one of the comments that was made during the competition last year by Arlene Stein, who I consider a friend and who I have already talked to about this, was that she said that what she liked about your food was that most women prepare food that's beige.
That's right.
And that your food wasn't beige.
Yes.
And Kate Elliot was in the audience, and I thought she was going to run to the stage and perhaps kill the lovely Arlene Stein. And now Arlene travels all over the world and has eaten at the finest restaurants and counts Renee Redzepi and all of these people among her friends and people who she's brought to Toronto for this international symposium that many of us have gone to. And she's a very experienced diner and a fierce woman in business herself. But I was actually quite upset about the comment as well.
Well, we assume we're all
allies.
What
does that mean? What is beige food?
Just meaning that food doesn't have a lot of color or a lot of perk when women make it. And that, she was very impressed with the fact that Jennifer's food was attractive.
I think what's interesting...
Isn't that the other way around?
Well, and what I found surprising was that a woman who deals with largely male chefs and is one of the first people to talk about how there maybe aren't enough female chefs in the business was the person to say that. And I she really didn't mean it the way it came out. She felt terrible about it. And I emailed her afterwards that she felt terrible about it. She apologized. But I think what she was trying to say was that how impressed she was with your food. But it came out as this terrible gender
Well, she gave it with one hand and took it away with the other. Yeah. And I think that we all make this mistake too, as women in this
we've
industry.
We've made it 50 times in this conversation already.
That we are all, or that we're all on the same page, or that we assume that every woman is an ally, or that they have the same politics, or the same presentation, or the same agenda that we all have.
Right.
And maybe that's not the case.
That's fucked up too.
That's fucked up.
So we've already talked, Jennifer, you've mentioned a couple times that you feel that women make prettier food than men do in general. And we've talked about how men are maybe more technical or machine tool driven than women are. All of these generalizations, of course, are a terrible thing, but it's hard not to make them, right?
I mean, there's a such thing as boy food.
All right. I call it dick swinging food personally.
Yeah. Then there's
like Toronto right now is loaded with chefs under 30 or chefs under 35, all men, all heavily tattooed. And it is a boys club and there's a lot of dick swinging.
Yep.
Food is heavily fatty, heavily salty, heavy. And
They made it with a chainsaw.
It's fun, but I'm like,
In
can
small
someone please
doses,
serve me a beautiful
probably.
little salad? Can I please have an amazing soup?
then we've got Bruce Wysela.
Right, who makes
looks
the
like
prettiest,
an angel plated his food.
I know, makes the prettiest food I've ever seen.
I mean, it's all generalizations.
mostly
There are always
vegetable
exceptions to the rule, but yes. Men are known for being a little bit more heavy-handed. My sous chef, too, Dan Borelli, makes
beautiful food
that is just gorgeous. I can't do it. I can't do it like he does it. I can't do it with a light enough hand. And that's funny because he's the dude, I'm the lady. Mm-hmm. We've reversed roles as far as that's concerned. And the plating. But yeah, I mean, I also think that there are trends, too. I think the
pretty food is in style right now.
Yeah, yeah. And I also think that big bearded burly men cooking in wood burning ovens is also a trend too.
For sure. Mm-hmm. Especially in places like Montreal and Portland and Austin, hipster towns. Right. That's the big thing right now.
Yeah.
That dick swinging food that we were talking about.
Right.
I love that term.
Now we've said dick more than vagina.
Oh, let's even it up.
Get it in there, Kate.
Let's even it up. So, an interesting thing is that in terms of going back briefly to talking about why there aren't as many women in cooking or why there could be more or why there should be more or whatever. Nigella Lawson, who again, we can pick apart her career if we want to in terms of whether or not she's a real quote unquote chef, because I don't know that she's ever worked in a restaurant kitchen for any extended period of time. But she feels that the reason that more women are not cooking professionally is because she thinks, and this is a quote the best I can get, freedom from kitchen servitude is recent enough that women want to flaunt their undomesticity just as women of an older generation refuse to learn shorthand. And I thought that was a really interesting idea because that, out of all of the shit I read about women in cooking and men talking about how women are great and women talking about how men are suck or whatever, all the conversations I read, she was the only person who sort of looked at it from this social, long-term anthropological level of maybe
oppression.
Right, and maybe some of the reason why women aren't running into jobs that are have this domestic feeling is because we're still flaunting our ability to not be domestic. What do we think about that? Everybody's got this, I'm thinking deep thoughts.
It really is. I've never really heard that take on it.
Being domestic doesn't necessarily just refer to cooking.
No, but when we first started this conversation, we all talked about, being nurturing and being,
right.
I mean, that's all ideas that are tied to domestication and motherhood. And those.
That as what makes women cooks different from men cooks.
It's interesting. Yeah.
It's interesting too. And April Bloomfield, who you wouldn't think of as being sort of your typical female chef, she's a little rough around the edges. She doesn't, she's not putting her hair up. She's not, she's very straightforward, little rough around the edges. She is the first person, just the way she talks about what she's cooking, you could tell that there's a level of love and sort of deep respect and passion for not just the food, but also for her staff and for the people she's feeding. And I think that that's very female, innately female. Not that men aren't that way, but I find that surprising with her because I think of her as being kind of brusque and sort of, a little bit of I've got work to do, get the fuck out of my way kind of person. But yet if you really hear her wax on in any Mind of a Chef or whatever, and she's talking about the way, she's tasting through a recipe or whatever, there's just this love and almost tenderness towards her ingredients, which I think is really fascinating. And I think that's sort of more in my head rather than the domestic sort of doting motherhood side. It's
just like a passion.
It's this but it's a tender passion.
Right.
You know, that certainly can be rough and tumble when it needs to be, but there's also this sort of like very intimate, loving relationship with the ingredients and her staff and the people who come to eat at her restaurant. I don't know. That was just my take on it. Dead silence again.
It's just really thought-provoking, that quote. I don't really know how to answer. I don't know how to respond to it. I really don't.
I know. It's something I still need to chew on a little bit, the
yeah.
Nigella Lawson quote.
Yeah.
Well, plus it's Nigella Lawson.
Kate's totally discrediting it now because of that.
I don't hate her, and she's real pretty.
She's awesome on the eyes.
So another subject, then I'll change the subject, is the idea that the restaurant industry allows for an accepted level of situational misogyny, right? That we as women accept this level of sort of...
Well, we participate in it too.
Right.
We draw dicks on everything. Jen and I,
Everything.
we were just, it's the first thing we talked about when we sat down. Like, it was about, you know, it happens. It's like,
does.
And it begins to not bother you. And it almost becomes not about misogyny, but just about the kind of
the fraternal camaraderie
of the kitchen. And
right.
it's just like part of it.
But
it
it's
doesn't
all
matter.
loaded with objectification,
Absolutely.
right? And when a hot customer comes in the kitchen or comes in the restaurant...
You mean a hostess?
No, well...
All the guys,
they have their little codes
you know?
and the way they talk.
I want in too, you
right,
know.
The codes.
I can appreciate beauty, so yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No,
cut
it's
you off.
okay, but I think like there's this. It's misogyny we wouldn't stand for outside of a restaurant, and it's misogyny that some of the men we love and work with wouldn't stand for if they felt their wife was being treated that way, or their daughter, or their mother outside of a restaurant. But in a restaurant, situational misogyny is acceptable, and I've worked in other environments that are equally sort of blue collar and male dominated. That this same sort of standard where being the first person to make the sick dick joke is the way that you make the guys more comfortable and how you kind of like get through a day.
That's what she said.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like how you break the ice, you know, it's.
And so, but what are we doing to ourselves by playing into that, right?
Right,
it's like,
right.
But if you're the woman who's like calling people on their dick jokes, you're never going to get ahead. It's like impossible. And at what point are you just being an asshole because you should be offended, not because you actually are offended, right? There's that too.
I'll say this. I think there's I think there's something to be said about the, you know, fraternization and like kind of having this, you know, fun with your colleagues and your coworkers, you know. But I will say that the first time that a very close friend of mine, Christopher Dagler, experienced another chef being misogynist with me, I thought he was going to kill him. Mm-hmm. You know, so I know that there is a time and place for it,
right?
And there is a time for us to joke around. But I know, like, when it's serious and it comes down to my
really
integrity or my character or my abilities as a chef, that there are plenty of men in the industry that I can sit around and joke with and drink with. But if I was being mistreated, they'd be the first ones to step up for me.
That's huge.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like that brotherly bond.
Right.
Absolutely.
You know, you can cross these inappropriate lines with certain people at certain times. But you have to know when it's not appropriate. And, you know, you can kind of tell by people's vibes, too. Like, all right, this is kind of creepy now. Like, back up.
Well, for sure.
You know, even from anyone, from, you know.
Doesn't have to be at work.
Guys delivering your produce to, you know, the new dishwasher. I
right.
mean, it can come from anywhere. So it's sometimes about, you know, personalities meshing, what you can get away with some people. And, you know, finding out their comfort levels as well.
Sure, and that's true of men and women regardless of their work situation. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about, unless there's something that you guys want to talk about, is I think that there's been a real change among the next generation, the millennial generation, in terms, I know, Kate, don't roll your eyes, in terms of their ability to be open about how they feel about things. Now, there are a lot of things that can be said that are negative about millennials and that I've heard on this podcast and others a million times about work ethics and things like that. The millennial at the end of the table who's taping our show is putting his thumbs up. He loves it when we bash the millennials, not. But so here's, like, for example, I've been doing what I do for 10 years or so, and in and out of the restaurant industry for 15 or 20, and I have really close bonds and relationships with lots of people, and it's what I love about my job. And it used to be that it would take a chef who was my age or older to tell me that he loved me or to show some sign of genuine affection beyond work relationships a year to do that, right? It would take a chef my age a long time to feel comfortable expressing himself to me emotionally in our friendship. I find that chefs who are under 30 will say that they love you and love other people and hug people, and they're just really much more comfortable with their own feelings, I guess. I don't know. And so I think this is convoluted, but I'm trying to get there. I think that mindset will also create a more open environment for more women to be accepted in the restaurant workplace. Not because women need to talk about their feelings, but because young chefs are more likely to be open to new ideas and to also show their own weaknesses or their own feelings about something more than old school chef who's kind of shut down and relatively unemotional.
Or might be threatened.
Right. Unless they're like throwing pans at your head. That's when you know you've done something wrong. So that's a long stretch to get there. And I'm sorry, I probably could have figured out a better way to get there. But I think that this new sort of open-minded, easy, more likely to admit when they're wrong, more interested in learning new things sort of generation of restaurant people might actually be more conducive to people of different colors, because we didn't even talk about that, and people of different genders working in kitchens. I don't know. What do you guys think? Am I stretching?
No, I don't think so. I think there's a different. No, we're talking. You're giving us some heady things here.
I'm sorry.
No, it's good. It's good. It makes you think. This is hard. This is a hard question.
Well, I think so.
Answer it.
The
Please,
quote that I heard is that a man's role in a man's world is changing, which provides lots of opportunities for women and minorities' roles in this new world to change as well.
But that still presupposes some sort of superiority on the male's part. Like his role has to change in order for us or minorities or other minorities to succeed.
I see that.
So I get where you're coming from. But I think that we have to be very careful to not kind of fall in this trap of reactionism.
Right, to make decisions about how we should be accepted
based
and
on
how
the way
we
a man
want
is
to
performing.
Right.
Or based on how his behaviors have changed. You know.
Interesting, Kate. I don't know. I think it's tough because as much as it's becoming increasingly less the world
I think an awareness helps.
Of a white man. It's certainly less of that world, and there are all kinds of books written about how, you know, white men of the age of 50 are falling apart right now because they've been accustomed to being raised in an environment where they were sort of the kings, and that the world doesn't work like that anymore.
Absolutely.
So this is certainly a social conversation that's happened many places besides here right now. But I do think that in blue-collar jobs and in traditionally structured career paths, it's still, many respects, the rules are still the rules that were there before, which happened to be rules that were made for men.
Absolutely, and they're insidious. And so even though maybe some small changes are being made or maybe the perceptions are changing, I think we have to be very careful to, you know, keep the conversation going and to keep, you know, kind of creating conversations like we're having today, or having an awareness of how those roles and how we react to them might, you know, kind of project or produce some changes in the future.
Right. Rather than sort of accepting those roles and trying to navigate around them,
right.
Or that we should be questioning those things all the time.
Right.
But how do you do that and not come across like a total bitch or like you're too politically correct for where you work or whatever? I mean, how do you do that?
You do it in the kitchen with the boys and draw dicks on things. And you still get that outlet, you know, but you still, there's a forum. There's a forum to be had, and it's the forum that we're having today. But then, you know, we're all going to go back to our jobs and
draw dicks on things.
We're still going to have that outlet, and we're still going to, you know.
But that's the fun part of, you know, working in a kitchen too. Like, I feel like there aren't as many rules as there used to be. I mean, not everything is so structured and, you know, culinary arts 101. I mean, you can do anything and make it work. For somebody in this town, it will work for. Somebody's going to love it.
Right, so you're saying you don't have to have the traditional brigade. You don't have to be using the traditional
think it's so
French
out
cooking
anymore.
techniques. You can have your own perspective and kind of break the rules.
Yeah,
right?
And even as far as anything, you know, guys, like you were saying, become softer in the kitchen. They're not as straightforward. They're able to show their emotions. Let them.
Yeah.
That game is such an emotional roller coaster. And being a woman, sometimes, you know what, I'm going to add fuel to the fire because my emotions are up and down every hour. So why not let them share in that? You know, express to me that you're down. Hug me when I walk in the door. I love you guys too. I mean, you know, be pissed off at you in 20 minutes, but at the same time, we're going to start the day on the right foot.
But I think that's what I'm saying. That is a more acceptable scenario now than it was when I was going to cooking school 20 years ago, and that you would have never been able to pull off in a traditional steakhouse or French restaurant or any kind of place besides maybe a burger joint would have like poo-pooed a woman who wanted a hug.
Right.
At any point during service.
Or a man who wanted one.
Right?
Oh, I have guys on the line. Stop me, Jen. You know, bring it in for a hug because sometimes you need that.
Yeah, no,
it's just a lot of times
you need that.
So I think that's the kind of evolution that's going to take us to where more women feel comfortable in the kitchen, is where we become more relaxed and genuine in our daytime jobs as we are in our real lives, which is again that whole thing about being bitchy comes up, like, you know, trying to be more of ourselves in our everyday work, but also, as Kate said, thoughtful versions of ourselves, maybe more thoughtful than we are at home. It's interesting. I wish that this podcast was full of answers and that we had some sort of epiphany that made us like float and become Zen-like or something. And I'm sorry that it didn't. I was hoping with you three at the table, it was a good option.
Have we let you down?
You have not let me down. I think the problem is this conversation could literally go on another 5 hours.
Right, exactly.
And so we need to do this again, I think. And I need to be better prepared for you guys to be 100 times more opinionated than I expected you to be. Anyway, any parting thoughts? Kate?
I thank you for letting us have this conversation. You know, I don't get to sit in a room with Jenny Boye enough, and this is my first time meeting Jennifer, so I appreciate it, and I appreciate you letting us have a voice and
thanks, Kate.
Having chefs have a voice in general in Buffalo. I really think you have kind of turned us around from the dirty kids in the kitchen to people who get to kind of express themselves and have an opinion. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you, Kate. I'm really glad that you guys were here and wanted to talk about this, because honestly, you know, somebody brought it up to me a couple months ago, and I was like, you know, women deserve better than to be corralled into a conversation about women cooking in the kitchen. But I really think it's a conversation that needs to happen a lot.
And I think it's important that we talk about it together, because you tend to believe the negatives that you hear sometimes. You know, I mean, we're outnumbered, you know, plain and simple. Mm-hmm. And when you aren't exposed to your own kind of feelings, vaginas, yes, Kate, in the kitchen, you know, you become what you're around, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I work with wonderful people, and I've never ever had a problem with anyone in this area treating me poorly or differently because I'm a female.
Except for that beige comment.
Except
for
that.
Actually not even about you. But.
Right, I know it. Which
and
is
it was
just
a
more
woman.
perplexing than anything. I know it. But I think it's important for us to get together and talk about things like this, because we know ourselves better than sometimes the other people that we surround ourselves with.
Or the other people who are having conversations about women and cooking.
Right, yeah. Right, instead of experiencing it.
Yeah.
A lot of people talk about it, but we live it. It's important to talk about it amongst each other.
Interesting. Jennifer?
Yeah, this was actually a really great experience. It was very cool. It was wonderful meeting all of you.
Yeah, Jennifer, we have to get you out a little bit more. I'm just going to say that.
Yeah, I know. I don't get out. I really have no time.
You're busy.
We're busy. You know, he's getting older, so it should be easier.
She means her son.
But this is my son. This was awesome. And it is nice to be heard, and, you know, to kind of break out of that mold, like, okay, just because I'm a woman and I cook, you know, I have limitations. No, I don't. Nice. I have zero limitations. And I just think, you know, I wish more people felt that way, women in general.
So if there's a woman right now who's listening, who's thinking about cooking, she should reach out to either one of you, any of you, and ask questions. Should I go to cooking school?
Go get a job. Don't go to culinary school.
Right. We could start that list of things that you should know. All right.
And learn what it's really like instead of what you think it's like. Learn from...
Good call. I wish I'd done that. You know, I went to culinary school. I didn't know a single person who had ever cooked in a professional kitchen. Biggest mistake, right? Biggest mistake. But what do you know? You know, and back then there wasn't an interwebs, so I couldn't Google it.
Yeah. Perception is a lot different than reality when it comes to female chefs.
For sure.
I've noticed. You know?
I agree.
Yeah.
Anyway, cheers to vaginas.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Vaginas.
Thanks for listening to Grain of Salt. We'll catch you next week.
Thank you.